Let's get ready to throw down.
What's up, everybody? Sales Throwdown. We are back, and we're talking tonight about using stories as sales techniques, right? Is kind of how we were talking about it. And we were getting riled up as we were kind of sitting here pre-gaming, and we're going to hop right back in. And Clint was talking about how using stories and bonding and rapport, right? When he's just getting to know somebody, of telling a story to like almost as like a pattern interrupt.
Yeah, sometimes, or just a discovery, right? Because you don't know, maybe it's your first phone call, or you've done business through emails, right? That happens to me all the time, where I've emailed somebody back and forth 100 times and I know nothing about them. And now I got to have a phone call because it's just gotten to that point, right? Where I just need to talk through it. I can't do this anymore in word form. So, feeling them out, figuring out what personality they are, what pattern they like to speak in. Sometimes it's a quick story. Hey, the other day I was at the grocery store, and you'll never guess what happened to me, and see how they react to it, right? Because if they take your side, take their side, all these little indicators start pushing them into a personality corner that you can start to deal with. And it is kind of a bullshit sales pattern that you get into, but it works. And that's all that matters at the end of the day for me.
So question about that, right? Because I've been thinking about a lot of this stuff, and you say a bullshit sales tactic, but
yeah, because if you're knowledgeable about any of it, you pick it up, right? That's what I call bullshit sales thing.
Okay, right? But here's the deal. I mean, is the difference just in your intention then? Because like whenever I hang out with my friends, right? I mean, I tell them stories, they tell me stories. I mean, we do this stuff, and it's not ever viewed as anything other than just like ribbing and storytelling.
Yeah, and I call it bullshit sales, because I'm literally doing it for the sales of the conversation, right? I'm trying to move it down the sales funnel, so to speak, versus where my friends, I actually truly want them to know what I'm saying and care about what I'm saying, and vice versa. So it is a little bit different.
But Clint, don't you want your clients and people you do business with to do the same, but just in a different category, like the business side versus the personal side?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, so it's not that one's bullshit and one's not. One's personal and one's business, but they sometimes follow the same format of, hey, let me tell you about this, or did you, whatever your storyline is, and then invite them into the story with their own point of view.
Yeah, and stories and pattern interrupts, things like that. I did it today quite a few times. There was a guy that kept calling me about a bid, and he just kept having question after question, and he's a old school guy that didn't throw it in an email like most people would, and you get this email chain bouncing back and forth. Mm-hmm. He wanted to just call you every time he had a question, which was, hey, that's great. I love it. But by the fourth or fifth time calling me, where most people be like, this guy won't leave me alone. I'm more of the, God dang, how bad did I screw up this time? That's how I'd end the phone with this guy, or, hey, Pat, how the hell are you? What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of breaks up that business tension. And so, whether you use a story or, different phrasing than everybody else would use, it all shifts the conversation to sales a little better.
Yeah. And then, because I'm feeling very nannish today, because we're talking about how we do this with our friends, but we don't really do it with our prospects. And then I'm kind of like in the back of my head, I'm like, so is the secret just making all of our prospects like our friends, which sounds like a very Nan thing to say?
God, I would treat all my prospects like shit then.
So Nan, wow. I mean, how do you think about all this?
Well, first of all, if you're not telling a story, what are you doing? Let's identify that. So if you're not telling a story, you're basically just telling someone what you want to hear, and it's not going to be very interesting. By telling a story, you're giving retain a lot easier. I'd like to never retain that cough sound ever.
Yeah.
So do you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
Help people retain better. You're not just telling them a little bit of information or a lot of information in nauseam. You're telling, this, you have a beginning, you're going to, we all know what a story is. Yeah. So you have that whole process that helps people retain. And then you can also, you can ask questions through it as well. So you're not just asking a straight question.
And that makes good sense, man. I will tell you that there is a way to tell these stories in a meeting or on the phone that one sounds like, because there's a lot of sales training out there that will tell you to use stories, right? Get interaction with your customer. They will tell you that, hey, use a story from another customer that you've done in the past and interject it in the conversation so they know that you're kind of a trustworthy source and what you're saying isn't bullshit. But there's a difference between saying things like, let me slow you down, and I'm going to tell you about an old customer of mine and how we did this project together. There's that way. Or you could just simply say, and I have to do this all the time, I have to stop myself and just say, hey, look, we've done this project in the past and it's worked out great, and here's how we did it, right? The same story, but I don't sound like the guy in the used car salesman on the used car lot, right? And there's just and that's where people, I think, you follow the book. The book's got the great template and the great ideas, but you got to make it in your own voice and how you would, and to Nan's point, like how you talk to your friends, right? That's how you should talk to them in the same language.
Oh, that's a nugget for me, actually. Right. Because I tell a lot of stories, when I'm selling people, or talking to them, or, doing, all the things that I do. And it's still slightly different because I still have a little bit of an agenda of like, oh, let me help you out and give you this little bit because this is what's customary, right? Because I've been kind of thinking about it as these stories are ways of proving that you've been here before, and that's what most of these people actually need, right? Because it's that trust that you've gone through this and you know what you're talking about.
So what that makes me think of is, in life, aren't we supposed to treat everyone equal? Well, so then you look at that and you go, well, how do I treat a complete stranger equal as I do my child, for instance? Well, that's why a story is so very vital because you aren't just thinking, you're not just sitting there thinking, how am I going to get them? If you treat everyone as, sorry, I don't know why I say sorry. I'm not, in the Bible it says that, be kind to your neighbor. Do unto your neighbor. Be that, and the reason is because if you treat everyone kindly, then you're not screwing anyone. You're not, but it's really hard to do. But if you can pull people in with kindness, and not the only way, but the best way to do that is using a story, so why would you treat a client any different than you would someone else? And, it makes me think, then why, I've told this story before, but my best friend says, I would never, she's VP for American Airlines. And she's like, I couldn't sell. I can't believe you are in sales. And I'm like, baloney, you are in sales. You're in sales with your kids. You're in sales with your friends. You're in sales with clients. You are always trying to convince someone of your opinion, of what you want them to buy from you. Across the board. Think how often you are trying to sell to your child to eat the healthy item, as opposed to the ice cream. And so we're always selling. And why do it any other way other than using a metaphor, that is going to pull them in, and they're going to not just look directly at what you are trying to, shove down their throat or whatever it is. You're giving them, you're enticing them through a story. It's just way more effective.
So Nan, though, speak to the mechanics of that, though. I understand what you're getting at. So from the mechanics of the conversation, what does that look like on your end? Meaning, how do you start that engagement and utilizing the story, or along the lines that you just described?
Okay, so this afternoon I went into a neurosurgeon that I'd never gone into before, just in hopes of enticing them. Never met them, and I quickly realized. So right now with sales, the big thing is, we're not really seeing anybody. They can't see your smile. They can't, there's just nothing very enticing. So you start telling the story of what's going on in my life, what's going on in your life. I mean, it's that simplistic in the beginning. You're telling, oh my goodness, my cat always thinks he has to get on the, I apologize.
Keep going.
It's the most hilarious thing that he does this. So does that make any sense? That's super simplistic, but my point being that you engage them with the story of why I'm here today. I'm not crazy about the mask, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to make.
So that's a good point, Nan, and that's one that I use every day is the mask, right? That we're all, or some wearing, some not wearing, right? But it's like I could say a phrase like, "Hey, these masks suck," right? And you're gonna get.
Did you just look up his butt?
Check it. Oil change.
We just lost the kid-friendly rating we had on this thing, guys. Damn it. We never had
that.
Damn it. I got to go change a setting on YouTube right now.
Listen, I love what Clint was saying, so can we get back there? Because it's so true. So a story, you're not talking about some, fairy tale story. You're just using I need to get a box for my cat. I'm so sorry. So anyway, back to Clint. I apologize, Clint, for the cat and everything, but that's exactly right. The story, when you progressed in your time with your client, your story is going to grow into much more interesting. But in the beginning, you do have to start with, as Clint and I did, the simplicity of, gosh, can you believe we're wearing a mask? Man, there's all kinds of stories you can say there, and you're just talking about life basically. But you're giving them reference, not just going, I'm here to sell you, blah, 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 or whatever. So that's
and sometimes I don't think that, at least in my client base, not everybody's going to want to continue these stories on with you, right? But you put them in a bubble, a personality bubble that you can communicate with. So it's a tool to get somebody there. No, most of my clients aren't going to want to talk about my day and my feelings and how what I do when I go home. I'm just not in that business, right? And maybe in healthcare with you guys, you're a little more people based, because you're in healthcare. You obviously care about some people, and maybe that's a big difference. But the point to what I'm saying is, you ask somebody, or you just say, "Hey, man, I hate wearing this mask." You're going to get a whole bunch of different next. There's the cat again.
You're also going to identify, that's a very valid point right there. You're also going to identify by bringing up something as simplistic as the mask, for instance, while we're on that. You're also going to identify if they want to proceed further in that kind of silly conversation. And if not, then you go, okay, well, clearly they just, what do you need? And then.
See, I sort of disagree, because I think you can break from a story and apologize for wasting their time with something that may, take the story away from them. Hey, sorry, I'm tying up your day with a bunch of nonsense, and see what that gets you, right? If it gets no reaction, you are tying up their day, or they'll be and say, no, absolutely. Yeah, that was funny, so you can ask permission for further engagement. You use the story. Go ahead.
I'm going to have to disagree with you, but I know you love to disagree, but you did not
like Clint does. Clint loves disagreement so much more than I do.
You did not say something different than what Clint and I have just stated. You just went further into actual action. So that's all that was. You didn't disagree with us. You just said, we said you get to identify by bringing up something, and you're saying that, no, you get to move on now. You get to move on. You get to say, everyone loves
cat?
No.
Oh, okay. You get to move on, Ben. Get the step up.
Yeah. I just want to point out that I don't argue. I just tell everybody how I'm right. If you guys would just listen, it wouldn't be an argument.
I love it.
Well
Somebody texted me the other day, and they actually texted me at the end of it, that's my D statement for the day. And I looked at it, and I shook my head, and I was like,
not even close.
Not even close. You're so far off the mark. It's so funny. So it's funny that people are starting to text me with like, oh, here's my I story, or here's my D statement and stuff like this. It's pretty funny. But so when I think that even when you're framing, right, or setting expectations for like what's going to happen, you know, setting the agenda. I mean, in that kind of also telling a story from the point of like, okay, here's what customarily happens in these conversations. So would it make sense to do it this way? You know?
Yep. That's a way to do it for sure. And I think that depending on who you're talking to, who your audience is, and by gauging that in the body rapport side of the initial setup, right, is how you approach your next steps in your sales cycle, whatever they may be, right? And if you can use stories, because he's an eye and he loves to talk about the same fish that he caught 70 times and it keeps getting bigger, then frame your next conversation around it, right? But you know, there's a point where there's some people out there, and probably in the D's and C's especially, that I don't have time for this storytelling shit. Let's get on with this thing.
Yeah.
Hey, I appreciate, you know, I appreciate that you know, you told me this cool story. But that's, you know, so I'll give you this nugget from at least what I've learned about telling stories. Is you have got to listen and watch tonality, or watch body language and listen to tonalities, because the first second that those people check out of your conversation, you are done telling stories, and you got to know that. And if you don't know that, you are in the wrong business.
Okay, and there's where I was going with my analogy, that the minute you perceive that this story has run its course, take that opportunity to move the conversation forward in a business agenda or whatever tempo. Now, the story could be business related, right?
Yeah.
And then I can stop boring Clint and go, Clint, we could be here all day talking about this stuff. What about this project that, you know, actually brought us here to make something happen on your side and my side, right?
Do you think
I stopped in the middle of my own stories and said, you know, it literally lost them. They look around the room, right? They looked out the window. They're on to something else in their own brain, and stopped my stories midstream and just moved on. Just up. Yeah. Anyway. And it's like, oh no, go ahead. It's like, no, it's good. Let's just move on. And you got to know when to do that.
Agreed. Absolutely.
If you're paying attention, you'll feel it, because it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, I was thinking back today. I mean, I probably told 10 stories today along the way. And one of them was about being in Vegas, and it was with the vendor group that came into the clinic today. So I had a business meeting, and it's a pharmacy that's going to work with our clinics. And then it's going to give us an opportunity to connect in a business way and maybe get some business out of it. So it meant something to both sides.
Sure.
And at the end of this whole thing, we agreed to do business, figured out what our next step was. And as they're walking out the door, the guy turns and says, hey, and we got to go to Vegas together someday, right?
Yeah.
Bingo.
Boom. Yeah,
bingo.
That's a win in my book.
When he comes back to me about my story, that's a win in my book, right? Now, then we exchange some emails after the fact about how we get some standing orders in their system from our docs and stuff like that. But the nugget was the story was good enough for his comment at the end.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah, and you know, that's really legit, Doc, because I use that all the time too, where somebody will say like, "Oh man, I love to go hunting out west of Montana. You know, I love to do that stuff." And I use that story to say, "Hey man, how do me and you work together so that we get so filthy stinking rich that we can go on these hunts 5 times a year, and I'll pay for everything? How do we do that?" You know, and you know, you got to, as much as you need to tell some stories and interact, you've got to use their own. That's the whole point of listening, and the body rapport side is to listen to what they're saying to you, hear their stories, because people, especially the eyes, and Melissa's hating me because I keep saying especially, but you're welcome, Melissa. I caught it. But yeah, you know, that I think
for those that don't know, Melissa's our back. She's stage production in the back, so we get a critique from her about the words we should and shouldn't use. Right?
She's our podcast fluffer.
There you go.
Wow.
Wow.
Whoa,
Wow.
shots
Melissa,
fired.
Don't, I was going to say,
Boom.
Melissa,
Yeah.
he did not mean that. He did not mean that.
Yeah. Clint's going to be barely a guest appearance on the next handful of episodes. Just edit it out completely.
Well, this show
There'll
will
just be a
suck.
dark square there, right? You know?
Remind me
There goes-
later to tell you the
there
most
goes-
tasteless joke from that jumping point I could think of. I'm not even going to say it live.
there goes half your audience.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh man.
And the
That's
other
funny.
half watch because they hate me.
Hey, either way, as long as there's an audience, right? Yeah.
Oh man.
What an I statement. I don't care why you're here as long as you're here.
Yeah, no doubt.
Oh God.
My OnlyFans page link is at the bottom. Go ahead and sign up.
Oh Lord. All right. Nan, are the animals okay?
Nan's got a farm over there.
I'm waiting for the alpaca to like spit at her in the face. Oh my God. All right, so back to stories and selling, right? I think that because I learned of this as a technique first, I have tried to like hold it sacred as a technique, and I only use it as a sales technique, right? But I do it. I use it, in analogies and metaphors and stories and everything else like this in every other aspect of my life, and those are genuine. And it's hard for me to use them in my sales conversations like authentically sometimes.
Why?
Because I have an agenda behind it, right? I'm trying to, and this is when I'm like prompting for, well, John, I don't know the answer for that. Well, sometimes when I hear that, it means A, B, or C. So because like to me, like that's a little mini story that I'm using, right? Like let's say I'm talking about budget, like, okay, like how much should this be costing you to fix it and never have to worry about it ever again? Well, I don't know. Okay, fair. What should it cost in your opinion? And like, well, John, what do you think it costs? Well, I don't know yet. Right. And I kind of go through that process, but all of that is, when you're bracketing, and doing all of that stuff, you're essentially telling little mini stories there. So when in my sales conversations, it always feels like there's an agenda. And so I'm trying to check box that agenda, check that box.
So you, maybe a nugget, maybe not, but if I were you, I would definitely say, hey, I'm trying to get to X goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you the story of why I think this will help you make your decision. And that'll be your agenda stated up front. Why can't you say that?
Because like, I think it takes, I could, but that's going to make me come off even more robotic than I do when I'm.
Really? That's crazy. See, I tell you what, I picture every single person that I talk, cause I'm just a good old boy. Right. And hey, really don't give a shit. But the point of it is that I just treat everybody like a good old boy. I don't care who you are, where you're from. I just treat you like you were, a guy at the coffee shop back home growing up. And it's just, hey man, I'm trying to help you out. You need some help. What can we do to make this done? And if we can't, let's end it. And my sales conversations 9 times out of 10 are just that simple. And yeah, I get no's really fast. And yes, I could probably burn away some business that I could otherwise salvage. But to me, it's like, I want to do that business with those people like me, right? As much as possible, because it's easy and it works. So I try to knock all those, I try to run out of options first of doing business with like-minded people before I have to go salvage relationships and be robotic. And I think I might be in an industry that I'm allowed to do that a little more than some, but I think but if you treat people like you would talk to your best friend or your dad or your grandpa or whatever, little brother, you answer the phone. Hey, what's going on? What do you call me for? What can I do for you? If you treat people that way, you get honest answers because you're just being honest, right? if you answer and you say, hello, this is Clint Bigelow from blah, blah, blah company, you've already put yourself down a path that you can't, it's hard to get out of. It's that tonality, that sales conversations, it's hard to get out of. So I don't know. And that's how I use stories, is to get myself, stay away from that one track sales tonality, and you fall down that rut that you can't get out of. Is just treat them like you want to be treated. And Nan was saying that earlier, right?
Yeah.
So John, back to what you alluded to was that, you get into the mechanics of your project, or if I heard you correctly, you're thinking about 2 steps ahead of where your story is. Is that what kind of gets in the way? Or go back to where you're having problems on the story issue?
How do I say that? I have an agenda, like always, right? Like when I'm, if I'm chatting with someone in DMs to like try to get into a phone call, I'm only having this chat because I want to see if there's a reason for us to work together, right? And I would absolutely love it if the world was just that simple. And I could be like, hey, look, I'd love to talk to you for 15 minutes, see if there's anything that I can help you with. This is what people talk to me about. Would that be okay? But what I'm finding is like, that's a struggle, right? Because of how
struggle for you or for them to connect when you say it that way.
Doesn't matter.
That's a good question.
I think it does, because if you're in your own way versus them, is it that you have a preconceived notion that they're going to get bored with what you're saying if you don't get to the meat and potatoes sooner? Or
no, because what happens with, like the social selling and the DM selling, that I'm trying to do, is that there's like this like tightrope, right? Because if I just bomb somebody with like, oh, hey, like super happy to be connected, would love to take 15 minutes of your time and see if I can help you out, everybody hates that, right? Because it's like, whoa, you couldn't even like try to have a conversation with me first, right? And so then on the other side of it is like, okay, like let's converse long enough so that way I feel like we can do these things, because like I can figure out really quickly, even via like text now, are they a D, I, S, or C, right? And so then my agenda is done. So then I'm just kind of like hanging out in limbo until we can actually move on to like a call. Does that make sense?
I know this guy that is very kind. He loves his daughter. And I've spent quite a bit of time with this gentleman, and I've seen him get his daughter to do all kinds of great things, be it being quiet in a room full of people and addressing what she should be doing, what she shouldn't be doing. In a matter of 5 minutes, I see him, and he does it with complete confidence because he knows very clearly what he wants and what his agenda is. He knows his agenda, what he wants it to start with, and what he wants in the middle, and what he wants it to be at the end. Yeah. So why can't this gentleman that I'm speaking to right now not do that when he's talking to a customer? It's the same thing. I just told a little bit of a story stating what you do all the time with your child, and I bet you do. I'm not around you and your wife, but I bet you do the same thing with her, that you're not manipulating. You're just saying, this is what's going on. How would this affect you if, or however you do it. Think how you do it. And you do it with sincerity and you care, and it shouldn't be any different. But for some reason, your brain has, from what it sounds like to me, just in this conversation, that your brain has shifted to a little bit of insecurity, to be absolutely honest. What I'm seeing, talking to a client when it's probably so not true. I mean, it's just, and if it is, who cares? Because your end result is the same. You would like to accomplish something, right? Mm-hmm. So why not approach it the same way? Is it just really hard to get out of your own way to do that?
That's a good question, and this might be just pure head trash, right? Like this might be a blind spot that I have not ever seen before until just right now. But how do I say that? The relationship with the people who know me really well, actually, that might be head trash as well. Because like I was about to say that, you guys know me really well, so I can just be really direct with you, and it's not that big of a deal. But I'm thinking that people who don't know me as well, when I try to be as direct with them as like I am with you guys or my family and stuff like this, it comes off badly.
Yeah.
So why does it come off badly then?
Because
they don't know you yet. Period.
Yeah.
Okay,
they
but
don't know me yet.
That's
So then,
everybody. But that's everybody, John. That's everybody on the entire planet, man. You until you've discovered each other, things are going to get taken out of context and out of ways. That's why you got to discover.
I have a question for everybody, right? How likable do you think you are on a broad spectrum? Right?
oh.
On a scale,
What's a scale?
A scale of 0 to 100,
No. I mean,
I'm
of
a
a
7.
broad. How likable are you to the S's, to the D's, to the C's, or to the I's? Are
That's
you a
interesting.
well-liked guy all the way around that pattern?
I don't know.
Because I think I am.
Well, of course you do.
I mean,
right?
all of us. Well, but no, because I have deep-seated friendships in all those arenas.
Okay.
Right?
As you should.
And I actually think that I like people who aren't I's more than I like anybody else. Right?
Of course.
Right? And
these animals,
Nanette,
man.
the petting zoo. What are you going to do with the petting zoo, right?
She doesn't even push the dog down. Like
she
that's
won't.
how
I'm like,
nice
just
the dog is so spoiled; it just has no idea.
It has a complete idea. All right.
So because when I see somebody who's a D, right, which clearly maybe I can slide that way a little more than I can do even the other two, I'm like, I want to feel his D-ness, right? I mean, I want to absorb some of that and take some of the passion they have for who they are and wrap that into that conversation of like, who'd you kill, Clint, today, right? I mean, let's egg this on behalf of the conversation.
Well,
right?
Okay, so here's the deal.
I really want to say something.
Go ahead.
Okay, so something that you told a story about how you felt about the whole COVID thing. I don't know if it was when we were recording or not recording, but how you're just kind of hanging out, enriching your life with your family, you're enriching your studies, you told that story. That is a fantastic story to tell people because then they will see a great side of you. That made me go, oh, that this guy has a really golden heart. Like, that's so cool. I loved that story. That everyone would probably, except for Clint, maybe wouldn't like that story.
Thank you.
No, Clint liked the story. I mean, because it highlighted the opposites between Clint and John.
Yeah.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you say, "Wow, I could never be you," then that usually means they can never be me. Right.
So hold on. Right. Because this is how deep the wiring goes. Right. I can't view a sales conversation as anything like other than a task. So it gets really hard for me to just like drop into there and not be thinking about, what's next? Okay, cool. They said this, I need to do this. It is so mechanical.
Why?
Why? It's just how I think about it. It's just how I do it.
Okay. And that's good. I'm not calling it wrong. I'm just asking the why. Why is it, how, because I mean, you're defining it. So it's got to have some value on your side. But if you see value, but you still have struggle related to some value component, isn't that a conflict? Here's all my value, but it conflicts me because I think it holds me back, right?
So today I read this story about this guy that just lost his job. He was an executive. He was doing fantastic. He lost his job. He went out, y'all maybe read the same story. He went out and he just started mowing grass, painting houses, just doing those he's making more money now, less time in his life, tons of less stress, just doing that. And he touted all of that. He went, you know what? I I shifted. I went from doing something that was just like stressful and it to something it was attitude. Attitude is everything. We've said it a million times on this podcast. And so I think for John, someone that is like thinking like John, you just need to shift your and it's so easy to just say, of course, but
Yeah.
think about what you're doing. You're not so, I feel like you put so much pressure on yourself probably, and it makes it more, you've said robotic, it makes it more, instead of just going out there trying to just make some money for the fam, man. Oh well, however you have to do it.
That's such like, so I like control, right? And so when I can hold these things in my head as steps that I need to go and do and check off or whatever, it gives me more control. So then mentally I'm in control of this nebulous thing, which is a sales conversation, and trying to navigate through it. So like literally that's how like how I'm doing it in my head. I'm like cool, like okay, I feel like I've got enough pain, so now let's try to transition out of this thing and talk in the budget. I mean, it is incredibly formulaic in my head, and I think there's pluses and minuses to it, right? Because I found a way that works for me. I mean, I can tell by the look on the three of y'all's faces that like this is like, oh crap, like John's a complete robot, but it's just like a thing I do. So, but I'm so bought into the control, right? Because the control leads to me not being wrong very often. So that's how it ties back to that thing.
Well, okay. So can you put that into a story for people so they better understand where you're coming from and why maybe you do the things that you do?
So for a long time when I was in sales, it was I was just kind of good by like proximity, right? It's kind of like I didn't really have any skills, compared to the level of training that I've done and we've all gone through at this point. It was a drop in the bucket, and so I had a lot of ego, right? And then whenever I went to work for you, was the first time I struggled. And so then it was just like, oh man, now I'm not enough to do this job well, right? And so then I find, coaching and training and these methods that are going to make me better at this thing, right? And so then it becomes a thing a little bit like Kung Fu, this thing that I can do to help myself in a situation that is going to be uncomfortable and somewhat uncontrolled. So I view, the sales training that I've done in, up until fairly recently as like kind of like Kung Fu, right? This like series of things and techniques that I can use. But then I catch myself recently being way too cognizant of like, okay, cool, like they did this, so let's use this technique. And I don't do that when I'm doing Kung Fu. So when I do Kung Fu, it just happens, right? So, and I rail against that because it bothers me that like I'm trying to build back to a place to where I can tell everyone, well, it's just something I do, because that bothers me at a very deep level, because I like to be taught things and I like to teach other people things.
So I want to interject here because I find this a lot in a lot of different aspects in life. You can train too many different ways, too much to do one damn thing. Oh, yeah. Your goal here is to sell something, right? And if you were successful at it before, it's probably because it was very simple, right? You had a product, somebody needed the product, and you convinced them that yours was better than the other one they were using, or you built a relationship so they bought from you versus the other guy, right. Period, right? Mm-hmm. I went through this struggle with golf, and I know a lot of people don't like to talk about golf, but I really, when I first started playing, knew nothing about the game. I just knew I had to hit the white ball down the fairway and onto the green and put it in the hole. And it was super simple, and I shot really well. I was 80, always in the 80s, 8 handicap. And I spent the next 15 years learning everything there was to know about the game, and my game became trash. I shot in the hundreds all the time, and it was so frustrating to me because I knew I could shoot better scores than that, but every week I would go play. And I just kept getting worse and worse. So I'd watch another video and I'd watch another seminar on how to fix my slice and how to fix my grip. And it got to be so much bullshit in my head that I couldn't do the one thing that I was supposed to do, which was hit the freaking ball straight. Yeah. Right. And now I've cleared my head, gone back to just, dude, what works, right? I know I need to get my club face square and hit the golf ball. And if I do that, the ball will go where I'm pointed. And that's what I think a lot of people suffer with in sales, right? Is we just we talk about it too much. We have too many ideas and we have too many directions and too many, we build all this stuff up. And if you don't perform it perfectly, you fail. And that's horseshit, right? Because it's really just about getting the message that you want to the customer as best as possible. And you're going to fail, and who gives a shit, right? And do it again and do it again until it feels good, and find that right customer. So I think that's a little bit of your problem, John. I think that's a little bit of everybody's problem that's trying to be out there selling, right?
Well, you nailed it. I was going to use the same analogy. It's like firing a gun, right? Some of these guys, and they're just lining it up and they're trying to get it in the bullseye. Man, I'm safety up, safety down. Okay, that's the way that works. Here's the trigger. The bullet comes out that end. Let's go, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could spend all day trying to hit the bullseye. I'm going to shoot in that direction, and I'm going to try to stay out of the way of the bullets come in this direction, right? And at a certain point, beyond that, let's get the show on, man.
Exactly.
We're there.
And I think that's what you're going through, John, is I think is probably the hardest challenge for C's to be in sales, right? It is a difficult personality to be in the sales role, except for during COVID-19, where it's the introvert's disease and you get to be locked up behind, you don't have to do any social interaction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm joking a little bit there, but I think that C's run into this a lot, where I've got to have a process for everything. And that's why all these, frankly, I think that I can hear it. I get a cold call from a call center, and somebody's wanting to sell me the next best widget, or a, timeshare in Florida, and they have a script, and you can tell when I screw the script up, you can hear them fumble for a second to find the next thing. And eventually it just is so unnatural that I don't even want to be on the phone anymore. And maybe I wanted a timeshare in Florida, who knows? But you've made this so awkward by trying to follow this process versus just saying, hey, I've got timeshares in Florida. Would you like one? Hell yeah, I want one. Sign me up.
Mm-hmm.
It can be that simple.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Nick.
I think it is very much not being a robot. Don't go in there like a robot. I love that Clint said that about, just following too many processes. Really, we say it all the time. It's probably obnoxious, but it is truly relationship. Know your stuff. Know what you're repping, selling, and know how to engage with people. It's really just that simple,
And
other stuff.
So this is not to say that I'm not successful, right? Like, I sell and have deals, and contrary to what the hair might indicate, like things are not like bad, right, at all. Like things are fine. But in my studies, I'm starting to see that there's another level of this that maybe I was not seeing clearly, right? Because you put in the work, you see some success, and then you're like, cool, I got it. And then like you turn around, right, and then it's like, oh, there's more, and let's go find that more. And I think I'm starting to find some of that for myself, which is about knowing the stuff so well, the mechanical side of it, that I can let it go and function without being hands-on so much.
Yeah. And the one thing that you do very well is create matrix for yourself, and stops and starts. And I don't do this unless there's a reward, or a reason why. And, if you being robotic throws your numbers in the wrong direction, then make it put that in your matrix,
Oh yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
I've got to, and I know you do that, but for C's out there listening, like if you're failing and it's skewing your numbers the wrong way, then you need to put that failure in your numbers so that you can fix that shit, so that the numbers down the road work out, and do whatever it takes, whatever you can do physically, mentally do possible to fix that freaking failure, man.
Yep. And then the other side of that is I'm also aware that I might be completely overthinking all of this because I live too much in my head anyway. So this might seem like a big deal to me at times, but it's not actually a big deal in any of the conversations I'm having. And I'm just projecting it because I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. I prepare for meetings and phone calls for one reason only. It has nothing to do with matrix or winning the sale or losing the sale. It has to do with my one fear, and that's embarrassment. I don't want to be the stupid guy in the room, so therefore I prep.
Mm-hmm.
But if I wasn't fearful of that, I wouldn't do it, right?
Yeah.
And everybody has different motivators here. Everybody has a different reason why they're going to prep and do different things. But man, you gotta overcome that fear at some point. Otherwise, you're just going to get bogged down and stuck, and you might as well quit because it's not going to get any better.
But is it so wrong to say to somebody, hey, you kind of lost me here. Can we back up a second and genuinely slow the conversation down or give yourself a minute to think about? I mean, there are natural ways to, prevent yourself from rushing into too much on the analytics or letting.
Well, yeah. So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut
go.
you off.
Well, no, I want to hear it.
There's this thing in Kung Fu, that we talk about, and now this of like, even if you engage badly, just the fact that you're engaging is going to put you ahead of the curve, right? And so the way that I've been thinking about a lot of this stuff, for the past week or so, is that just engage in some way, but don't have that moment of that pause, like deer in the headlights thing, that happens when you get caught in a moment where you're not prepared.
Well, but if you're not prepared, why not own that? Go, interesting, I wasn't prepared for that. Let's talk. Can we talk some more about that and get them, because we're all smart enough to follow somebody's lead. Let them start leading you at that point, knowing that you really sit with a lot of expertise in your arena. But, we got to kind of get through this wherever we're at to get to the next step. Does that make sense?
It does, but on a certain level, I don't want to give up the control of the conversation, right? Is kind of how that works.
Why do you have to control the conversation?
Because I'm the guy who's done it before.
Done what before?
Had these kinds of conversations, right? So when no, but hold on.
What kind of conversation though? Yeah,
right?
What kind of conversation?
The way that I think about all this is like, okay, there's the salesperson, right? And then there's the buyer, right? Who has had more reps of having these conversations out of those two situations? Usually it's the salesperson, not the buyer, right? So the salesperson should take the lead and lead the way through the conversation, right? And let's talk about what normally happens at the end of the conversations and what happens next and everything else like that.
That's just assumption. You don't know how many.
Disagreeing.
I'm so far the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Really?
I'm here for you. What do you want? What do you want to talk about? Like, seriously.
Well, because
I'm calling.
How then, if you're taking control, do you know you've really found a true problem that this guy needs or gal needs to solve? I mean, I get the formality of, hey, trying to talk about, but I mean, talk about your agenda or the sales process from your side. Like, hey, here's what to expect whenever I sit in front of you. But after that, I need to start discovering from you, John, I kind of feel some pain here, or I know there's a conversation that's centered around solving something, either in a better way than what you're currently doing, or in a new innovative way, whatever that twist may be. So then I got to start getting some information from you. You got to start telling me your story, so that then I can get down the road with, here's a light bulb moment. I'm looking for light bulb moments that put me in the spectrum of being able to solve something for you or engage in business that puts money on the table for you and money on the table for me.
No, I'm with you a little bit there. And to be honest with you, this very topic is a lot of the reasons that I lost faith in some of the systems that we were learning, all of us, and some of the selling training tools out there, is because the fact that I have to set this agenda, and I know that I'm speaking to the book, right? I'm speaking line item book stuff here, but that I have to set this agenda, and I must set the time and the place, and do you have 30 minutes, and is it okay if I run 5 minutes back? You've already lost a guy like me so many times over that I had to adjust from that script. And I will tell you this, that just the other day, I went with that script because it was a very important phone call of a customer that was not willing to return to do business with us ever again because of something that happened. And I wanted to get to the root of that problem. So because of the embarrassment and the failure. Yeah.
We should pause and go into part 2 because we're at 50 minutes now. So let's pause real quick, pick this up in like another episode, and we'll just keep on with the story. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Mm-hmm. So we will see everybody next week. Thank you so much and have a good night.